Who is ready to sculpt a rotting log? Now in this video we're going to be using Sculpting original oven baked clay to create a rotting log. Now I have done this in the past, but this time I'm focusing more so on the branches that we're creating and also describing to you why I'm creating the branches in particular ways, not only to give the log overall support because it's not anchored to the actual diorama in any way, it's held there of its own volition, but it's also going to be holding the actual weight of the spider body itself. So it has to be pretty strong. So we'll use some armature wire, some different things like that to kind of create a really strong structure. Again, we're going to be using Sculpting original oven baked clay for the actual base of the log, and then we're going to be using DOS air dry clay to go over the armature wire to add additions to the actual log, because we don't really know how a lot of those pieces are going to fit together until we get the spider put up there to know where those leg supports need to be. Let's get to the studio and let's get some clay crafting going. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into the studio, and let's go ahead and get to crafting. Now, in this video of the overall Goliath Birdeater Tarantula Spire Diorama Gold Edition 3.0, however you want to say it, this is the abstract raised base version of this diorama. Now, this thing is absolutely massive, and at this portion in the project, we're going to be using clay as well as these stainless steel tumblers to create the clay sculpted log that's going to go on top of the diorama, and then the spider will kind of sit on top of this. So we're using two tumblers here. We're using a 30-ounce skinny as well as a 12-ounce pint. I've had this pint sitting in my studio for a very long time, and it's just been kind of just a cup that I use around the studio for particular projects, and I've just decided to go ahead and use it. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just, you know, it's been a little bit dirty with paints and things like that, and we're going to go ahead and give it a good sanding, and we're going to wrap it in a Sculpting original. So the main base of the actual log formation is going to be Sculpting original, and we'll start to build up textures from there. So after we wrap the entire main stainless steel base with the Sculpting original, which is roughly almost under like a whole pound of clay, you can buy them in small containers from Walmart and things like that. So we're also going to use a multitude of tools. Usually I'll just kind of set it up on the back end of the 30-ounce skinny, and then I'll kind of go ahead and start just sculpting some textures into it. I'll use the wire weeding tool, just removing clay streaks up and down the actual tumbler. With a lot of like logs of this type of situation is you would see a lot of textures in the actual wood itself. Now this isn't the wood bark. The wood bark is going to be a separate video. Be aware of that. So if at the end of the video you're like, it looks really great and all, but it's just like it's missing something, it's because it's missing the bark that's going to go on top of it. Now in the past, in a lot of situations, what I'd do is I'd actually use real bark, and I would just bake it and purify it of, you know, like pests and things like that through a baking process. But today what we're going to do is we're also going to be working on a actual kind of like a bark texture out of DOS air dry clay. So I'm very looking forward to that. It's something that I've never really done before here in the studio, but it's definitely going to level up the overall creation and design of the project. Now I'm using a lot of different tools here to create this overall textured effect on the actual outside of the log. And so we're using wire hoop tools, we're using dental tools, we'll use some silicone tip tools, and we're just basically creating a bunch of striations that are going to go the full length of the actual tumbler log itself. We're also going to create kind of a ring effect on the very bottom. So we're just going to build up just a bit of clay there, and then we're going to slowly take out circular rings with the clay removal tool here, the hoop tool. Using a ball stylist here, we're going to go ahead and create a little bit of texture by adding extra meat or clay in particular areas, just to create a lot of like depth and variation. As you can see here, this is where I'm kind of just adding a little bit of like almost like a little like cap of clay. And in this little silvered area will be like where a hole would be recessed into the actual log when I get it fully painted. So that'll be a lot darker. It'll make it feel like there's a lot more depth to the overall sculpted item without having to actually cut out that hole. I'm also going to add a little bit of armature wire to just the top part of the log sculpture. This is where the opening is going to be, and where we can kind of put like little surprises in the diorama, in the log cavity for the customer. It's just extra little things that make it really special. And I want to make sure that the top parts of this like broken branch or log effect really have a lot of like dimension, and we want to make sure some of these pieces of like wood texture go out and away from the actual build itself. We want to make sure that we build up particular areas on the log itself so it doesn't feel like they're all the same, just straight tumbler like shape. We just want to make sure that we have a lot of shape and dimension in the overall sculpted item that we're creating. It's not supposed to look like it's made from a machine or a cast. It's just supposed to be very free. And every time I sculpt this, I probably sculpt it different ways. But the overall design is relatively the same, and I add improvements along the way every time I create it. So it's just a really fun process. And once you really start to get the clay onto the item and you start to sculpt it, texture it, and make it look like a bug-ridden log, and it has a lot of those like little termite like kind of like paths in it, and there's a lot of decay and destruction. And when we come over with the flocking and all the dirt textures and the moss layer, it really just it intensifies the depth of the item. It's really cool. The smallest details sometimes make the biggest difference when it's coming to like making it all to come together in the final stages. We are going to add a branch on the front, as well as like a little like knot or branch stub on the very back. And then as we go through this process, it's going to get a little bit more intense, so I'll start to add more branches from there. And each armature wire system that we add along with the clay to the overall structure just intensifies the overall finish of the sculpted item. And if you've already seen the overall finished form of this creation process and playlist, then all for it. I'm sure you see how awesome it is and how great it turned out. But if we wanted to turn out and make the logs separate or different ways, and for instance, this time I made it removable, whereas last time I didn't. We can always change specific things along the process, and it really does change the way it assembles as well as the way it functions when it's shipped or being used by the customer. I just really want to be able to kind of like express my artistic freedom with a lot of these projects, because I've sculpted this log probably 2 or 3 times, and every time I make improvements to it. And it's just really cool to know that customers can kind of experience their own little enjoyments of unboxing, assembly, and they get something very specific to their project. So even though like the spider's casted, a lot of these types of like items like the log and things like that are all hand detailed, and I think that just adds a little bit of a more personalized feel to it. Now, here's the log completely baked out, and as you can see, we do have it actually on the base itself. And what I'm now doing is I'm using an X-Acto knife, and I'm going to mark off where I need those kind of like little spider leg placements to be. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this as an opportunity to kind of build up exterior clay layers on top of the original Sculpey original base for the log we created. So the Sculpey original has already been sculpted to perfection. It's been baked, it's cooled, and now we've already base coated that in a Mars Black. That kind of seals it and removes any kind of dust particles, and it also creates a little bit of strength as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a DOS air dry clay, white, not terracotta, just white. And we're going to build up particular areas on the exterior portions of the log. And it's going to kind of give those legs a little bit of support, because all the legs are magnetic, right? So they need to fit specifically into the right location. So what I'm doing is I'm creating little footholds for each leg to kind of sit down into, and the customer will be able to attach it magnetically to the side of the spider, and then straight down into the little location that I had sculpted for the leg itself. And all of that will be blended and painted into the actual sculpted log. So they look like the legs are really just kind of hanging over the sides of the diorama. That won't be like that forever. We're going to kind of bring things together throughout the process. Now, originally I was going to sand off that paint and then begin with the air dry clay, but I was like, nah, let's just go ahead and run with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start building up DOS air dry clay on the exterior of the Sculpey original base coated log, and we're going to go ahead and feather this and then create a bunch of textures before we actually imprint it with the foot or the leg that it has assigned to it. And there will be one of these for all 4 legs, the length of the actual log tumbler build. And we'll just slowly build up these layers here. It's really not too complicated, guys. And if for some reason we didn't get a good bond between the DOS air dry clay and the paint, or even the DOS air dry clay and the Sculpting original base, because you can actually come in and you can kind of really scrape that up and expose a lot of that clay structure if you felt like the DOS air dry clay wasn't going to attach to the painted surface. But I was pretty confident overall that I was going to be able to have a successful adhesion between the clay and the painted surface. So I didn't feel like I needed to really scrape that off with like a Dremel tool or anything like that before I started to attach this other clay to it. And you also got to remember that this is air dry clay. This isn't oven baked. So the actual item, we're done with the oven work, and we're going to be working with the air dry clays, which will just dry in the room temperature air. And there's just really no rush to kind of make it dry even faster than it does, to rush it through the process. Everything needs its own level of time to dry, and then we can move on to the next stage after that. And I really do like working with the air dry clays a lot of times, because even if I wanted to be impatient in some ways, I could technically just go ahead and put a layer of Mars Black or lamp black or watered down paint over that still drying clay, and it would be fine. It may crack and I might have to go another layer, but you could go ahead and jump the gun and put a paint layer on there if you wanted to. Just remember that it would technically still be drying underneath that paint for a while, So here what I'm doing is I decided to go ahead and add a branch to the backside of the log. Now, the original design for the Goliath, Birdeater, Tarantula diorama that I made in the very first portion of the entire diorama series is I had not included this. So originally the spider supported itself of its own weight. So I put armature wire in between the legs and the body, and it's held itself up. And I just feel like that's just a weak support. So this time we will use magnets instead, right? So each leg will be blended individually, but because of that, the legs can't hold the weight of the body of the spider. So what I needed to do is I needed to have a way for the body to be supported above the ground terrain, or the water feature they're going to be adding on the front of the diorama. So we're going to use the same DOS air dry clay, DOS for the win, right? And we're going to go ahead and layer this over this kind of, I would say, a little bit of an armature wire system. I actually drilled a hole in the actual tumbler. So I scraped away the paint. I drilled a hole with a titanium bit, and I went ahead and put 2 big old lag bolts in it. And these are really, really tight, and they're not going to move once the clay is all around them, even if there's a little bit of vibration. But then I went ahead and wrapped the armature wire around those bolts, and it gave us a really strong structure on the front for the main support branch of the spider. And then there's this small branch that's going to be on the back of the log, and I actually really like it. It's a little bit weaker than the one on the front, just because it's not using a lot of armature wire, and the armature wire is a little bit thinner gauge. But I wanted the branch to be very, very thin and just kind of twig-like, not like branch, right? So I went ahead and applied this on there, and we're going to go ahead and break it off into 2 different little branches here. And then we're just going to wrap the same air dry clay around the armature wire all the way up until I'm happy with it, and then I'll snap that off. Now I am adding a lot of clay here, and we're really going to kind of bulk out the log with this DOS air dry clay. So originally it was just Sculpting original on the base, right? We baked that, and then this is just DOS. I'm always going to repeat that because I don't know where people are jumping into the video sometimes. So this is DOS air dry clay. We're wrapping around the little twig branch here. I really love, because until it's dry, you can really kind of move it around and tweak it the way you want until you just really get happy with how the overall shape is. And we need it to be that way because we're going to put the leg on it in a minute, and we're going to use that to push the branch down, and then that will give that leg that simulated support, right? So it'll have a support for each individual legs on the left or upper body of the spider. So this is a little bit of a chore, right? Trying to get this DOS to stick to this armature wire. If I really wanted to wrap a ton of armature wire around that single piece, then I could probably get a little bit better adhesion. But it was just being a little bit of a chore. So I really had to work at it this time just to get that DOS to really wrap around the armature wire and really hold it tight. Otherwise, there could be a lot of air gaps there. We're applying a lot of water here just to kind of smooth things out. I want to kind of do a feather effect over the length of the tumbler, just because I want to make sure that it blends well when I get it all said and done. Now, yes, we're going to come over it with some bark in the next video of this series, so you'll be able to see me use some DOS air dry clay to create like realistic bark textures, and then we'll detail paint those while they're on the item before we remove them and then glue them into place. So it's just a really fun process. It's something I've never done before. It was just something new, and I really enjoyed it. And I plan to probably do it moving forward for a lot of the projects. I think it added a little bit of extra like craftiness to it, instead of just me using some bark that I just happened to pick up and treat, so that I could use it in like a flocking like material or scenario. So right now I'm just trying to make sure I bulk it out. You don't want it to be too heavy either. So like if I put too much weight on those branches, it would just eventually just sag it down on where it's attached to the armature wire going around the or hugging the tumblers, and it would just be too much weight, so it wouldn't be able to support itself. So you have to find that perfect medium and middle ground to where you like the weight of it and the shape of it without putting too much just pressure on where it's supporting it, because it could break anytime. I mean, once it's dried and it's brittle, if I hit it the wrong way or bent it, then it's likely that it could break. So we're trying to bulk it out a little bit just to give it a little bit extra strength, so I can hope that it can make it to the customer without breaking, because it is a thinner branch after all compared to the thicker one on the very front. And when we do package things like this up, it is just so tough because it's so oddly shaped to package it up absolutely perfectly. And it's just bound to have breaks here and there. So some of these kind of creation videos are very important for customers to see if they had to patch something without having them just say ship it back to me. And that kind of almost happened in a way, but I'm kind of glad the customer was able to kind of meet the needs of the art, and I'm glad they were happy with the overall product that they received from the packaging. Now I packaged this thing like it was bulletproof, and I used box on box on box, inside boxes, inside foam, inside bubble wrap, inside parchment paper, and it was still very difficult to reach Germany without getting damaged. Because we just don't know what kind of status those boxes are going through to get to its destination. For all I know, the UPS or whoever it is driver, like it's like just driving and just like throws it out the wall, like the window or something. Okay, maybe not that to an extreme, but we just don't know what kind of circumstances. It could have like a lot of luggage sitting on top of it, or and even if you do put a fragile sticker on it, you don't know what is happening in transit to your customer. And when you're shipping art like this, not just art, but like very intricate, very oddly shaped pieces, it just makes it very hard to get those items to the customer in an absolute safe way. So, like I said, I packaged this thing like it was a bulletproof tank, and even then we had some problems that we had to remedy. So again, I am very eternally grateful that the customer was just very understanding and very, very outgoing as well throughout the process. And I get those customers ever so often that I have to communicate with a lot throughout the creation process. And I know it is just kind of like easy to say it on camera and stuff, but it was a joy to work with them. And I do enjoy customers like that because we communicated over Etsy chat for months. So it was just a very enjoyable process. Now you can see that I did branch this off into two separate kind of like branches there, and one is going to hold the abdomen and one is going to hold the carapace where the legs are attached. So I can also kind of angle that how I want to. So what I'll do is I'll put some saran wrap on there. I'll put the spider body on there, and then I'll use the pressure of the spider body to kind of bring that down a little bit to find the absolute perfect angle of placement for the spider. It's a really cool process, and because I did inset magnets into the body as well as the branch itself after it was all dry, and we used Gorilla Glue to attach that those magnets, it has a snapping feature. So when you get the body of the spider close to the grooves that I impressioned in it, the spider body and the branch, it will naturally just draw its, like, snap and draw itself into the correct position, and it's just kind of cool. So before this is even dry, I will take the spider body and I will impression it on tops of those branches that are supporting the body. So I'm texturing this all along the way, you guys. It's starting to chalk up a little bit on the exterior of the clay, and that's okay, but it can apply a little bit of tugging. So you just got to find that perfect medium. I'm using the wire tool, and because it is slightly drying on the exterior of the Dossier dry clay, it does a lot of pulling, and that pulling can create a really cool kind of like wooden texture effect. And if you don't like that along the way, you can also smooth that out with some water, or even a little bit of sandpaper can remove that after it's dried. So here's the body, right? So as I said before, I'm going to go ahead and impression this into the actual branch itself, and I'm going to use it while it is wet, and I'm going to kind of position the body of the spider how I want. So let's do a test fit with some of these magnets. This is what took so long in the whole process, guys, is because I had to make sure that all the magnets were set into position, although they're not blended into the body yet, but I need to make sure that they were already inset with magnets so that I can make sure they set on the body the proper way before I can make them set on the actual diorama log and rot formation the proper way. So you can see I did bring that little branch down quite a bit. We had it way too high, so I did bring it down, and then along the way that had a little bit of cracking right there. I do have to come back in and create a little bit of a bond there with some more clay, and then we're going to go ahead and continue adding on additional pieces. So here's the back leg right here. Now just remember that the legs haven't been blended into the body yet, so they have a little bit of pulling action because of the magnetic feature. But there's the front right there. That's the front second leg back, and then it's a very long leg, but it really looks cool because it really projects the body spider out and away from itself quite a bit. And sometimes, originally when I made the very first one for the square, like it's the 2.0 or the silver version, this is the 3.0 or the gold version, I didn't have as seamless of a stance as I did this time. So don't get me wrong, that was an absolute incredible piece of art that I produced for the customer, and it was amazing. But this one, the legs were just seamlessly snapping into place a lot different than they did originally. And every time I make this, I'm making upgrades on not just this gold version, but I'll carry some of these over into the other versions of this diorama as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and apply a Mars Black base here. Now, let's talk real quick, guys. So just remember that you're watching just a segment of this overall series, and I've created almost 40 to 50 videos in the Goliath, Birdeater, Tarantula diorama series or playlist on my YouTube channel. Everything from sculpting to water features to painting to casting to mold making, you name it. Like, I've showed you all sorts of techniques and things, and it's really enjoyable. It's really binge-worthy content. Now, don't get me wrong, my editing style and things are changing throughout my growth of YouTube creation, so you'll see a little bit at that as I go through those creation videos. So the videos just progressively get a little bit better. They're just a little bit faster paced, and my editing style changes. Okay, that's just naturally going to happen. But you can see how the overall art creation is changing as well, and I really look forward to creating a lot more large scale dioramas. So I've got some projects that I would like to line up in the near future that are going to be like 3 feet tall. Some are going to be supported by a single pipe where the base is really small, the very top is extremely huge. I want to do some Pokemon projects. I've got a lot of ideas. I just got to find time, right? Time is the key, and I do work a full-time job, so this is my side fun hobby. And I really do hope you guys just understand that I really do put a lot of time into these videos and this content. And not just that, but I'm also selling art, right? So like, I'm creating all this content, editing and marketing, but also I'm creating art, right? So it's just very enjoyable, and I hope you guys understand how much work that I put into the channel here on YouTube. So please make sure you subscribe, guys. It means the world to me, and I look forward to growing even more here in the near future. I've got about 400 or 500 different pieces of art pieces that I want to create on my list, and I'm going to start consolidating them down into single entertainment purpose videos instead of long form series. That's naturally going to happen, and that was one of my goals, from 500 to 1,000 pieces of content here on YouTube. Look how it looks when it's all painted out, guys. Now this is just the base brown. We're going to darken out a little bit more when we do the bark textures, which will be in the next video. We'll be using DOS Irdry clay and some saran wrap and awesome paints and techniques to create that. We'll do some impressions of some different log pieces, some bark and things like that, to create this realistic texture. I'm not going to make the bark overly too thick. I want to make sure it's nice and neat and tidy, and it doesn't take away from the overall diorama. As you can see, we did make some impressions, and we'll be getting into that in the next video. So make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll get to it soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Later.